So it's time to analyze another strength and conditioning routine, this time of a world champion boxer, Artur Beterbiev. And this man is nothing short of a power freak. By the time of this video he is 19-0 and he has won all of his fights by stoppage. And here is a very interesting fact. By the time of this video, this guy is 38 years old. In boxing age, this is actually quite old, especially in his weight class, and he's still competing with those youngsters and knocking them all out. Oftentimes in various sports, when athletes start to reach, say, the 40s and even the early 30s, things such as fast twitch muscle fibers, they will start to decline and you will simply not have that snap as you had in your younger days. For Artur, however, he shows no sign of slowing down and he's still knocking out all of those youngsters and displaying tremendous athleticism in his fights. And with that being said, it could be argued with such a athletically and power demanding sport such as boxing, that the older you get and those qualities start to decline, like your fast twitch muscle fibers for instance, the more important strength and conditioning becomes, because you need to maintain a strong and healthy body if you're going to have a chance competing against those youngsters. All of this got me excited to take a look at his strength and conditioning routine, see how he approaches that, and this is what we will go through in this video. In this first clip we can see him doing some various hand strengthening exercises. He does push-ups on his wrist, push-ups on his knuckles in an explosive manner. And this is for the simple fact that hand injuries are so evident and prevalent in boxing. We need to do our best to prevent those from happening. You do not want to be away for multiple months or up to a year because of a hand injury, so hand strength is super important. The hand is a very complex structure. There is tendons, ligaments, you have many types of bones within the hands, and this is a very complex structure and it's very vulnerable. Some common injuries are the boxer's fracture, you have wrist sprains, thumb sprains, tendon injuries, carpal bossing, many more. We need hand strength as boxers. And here is a very simple table of hand strengthening exercises you can implement in your training, similar to what Artur is doing in many of his training footage. You can do them perhaps at the end of a boxing session 2 times per week. You can start off with this. I would recommend choosing 2 or 3 exercises from this list and doing them back to back. Next up we can see him doing the bench press. Here is a video of him doing a pretty smooth set of 6s at 100 kilograms or 220 pounds for you Americans. And it looks pretty effortless, pretty smooth. Here is a max set of 6 reps at 120 kilograms or 265 pounds. And this he struggles a bit more in, but still, those are very strong numbers in the context of a boxer. Now he also appears to be using some sort of foam padding on the bench press, which I assume he does to reduce the impact of the bar landing on his chest. He could probably get away without it with some technical training, but it seems to be some security measure. And you have to understand that for athletes you're not going to compete in powerlifting, so you don't need to do the bench press with a pause at the bottom to remove the elastic energy, the stretch shortening cycle. This is actually, I would argue, useful for you in boxing because you want to train yourselves to use this elastic energy, which he is doing right now. Now, when we look at strength numbers of, for example, boxers, we always have to look into it in context. Because you cannot compare the performance of a boxer to that of a powerlifter or a weightlifter, because their priorities are astronomically different. In boxing, your main emphasis is boxing itself. You do not have the same technical experience as a powerlifter, not the same training hours in exclusively a strength sport. You have your own sport to train for. So in this context, those are very strong numbers, and they can even be compared to regional competitors in the sport of powerlifting in the weight class, so it's very impressive. Now, as for bench press and its relevance to boxing, the bench press is basically for horizontal pressing or pushing strength, which is very prevalent in boxing, you could say. There has actually been some studies that find a correlation between punching power and bench press performance, meaning that boxers who possess a lot of punching power, they oftentimes display high levels of force production in bench press also. Does this mean that if you increase your bench press, you will punch harder? We have to be very careful with cause and effects when reading those kind of studies, because correlation is not always a causation, but it is possible, yes, generally. If you increase your bench press, you increase your strength in a horizontal pushing manner, and a punch is a very complex mechanism that also involves your leg contribution, your core contribution, and this is simply one puzzle in the whole equation of punching. So it will contribute probably, most likely, yes, but you also have to emphasize all other areas like hip rotational power, leg contribution, leg drive, and all of those things. I have made videos on this in the past, you can check them out if you want to. Nevertheless, if you're a beginner in boxing, master the fundamentals first. The bench press, like increasing strength in your bench press, should be the bottom list of your priorities if you're new in this game. In this clip we can see him perform a narrow grip bench press, just like a standard bench press but with a more narrow grip. This is more concentrated on the musculature of the arms instead of the chest, especially that of the triceps. And of course, neck training. We can see a lot of footage of him doing neck training. He does flexion, extension, side to side movements. And the reason of why boxers do neck training is pretty obvious. They hope that they will increase the strength of their chin so that they reduce the chance of getting concussed, basically. And there has actually been some studies on this that show how neck training may potentially reduce the injury of concussion, because the cervical muscles, you see, they support your brain better, so when you get an impact, the sort of bounce will get reduced. This is the idea behind training your neck. Nevertheless, I would recommend you incorporate this as a boxer. And here is a simple table you can follow of various neck strengthening exercises, sets and reps and all of that. You can do them at the end of a boxing session also, or at the end of a strength training session. Now, one thing Artur seems to be very enthusiastic about is various forms of hammer training. The sledgehammer on the classic tire and various other variations. The purpose is most often hip rotational power and general power development. You want to hold this hammer and hit it as hard as you can on the tires every time, to recruit motor units and learn how to train your brain to produce powerful movements. A powerful action starts in the brain. It starts with a thought. You have to think powerfully so that you teach your brain to recruit those motor units that travel through the spinal cord to the corresponding musculature. Power training is different from strength training. You can check out my other videos on this subject. Now, this seems to be a training method that Artur is very enthusiastic about, and sometimes enthusiasm should be prioritized over sport specificity, because this is a major advantage. With that being said, I don't really see how there is an advantage over hammer training with more boxing specific methods such as the medicine ball hip rotational throws, for instance. This would probably be better, like more optimal for boxing. But once again, enthusiasm matters too. Speaking of medicine ball throws, we can see him performing them as well. Here we see him doing some max effort medicine ball training variations, and this is once again for power development. Teach your brain how to recruit motor units and perform more actions explosively. Power training is a mental game. It starts in the brain. You have to give everything you got into every repetition. So for instance, why would you perform a medicine ball punch instead of just a standard, for example, a heavy bag punches? The major reason is the impact forces. When you throw a medicine ball, you get no impact in return, and there is a lower chance of injury. If you're a boxer, you already hit pads so much, you already spar, you already do so much heavy bag work. So in power training sessions, it's probably more advantageous to occasionally include the medicine ball throws. And another reason is that you have quite a bit of resistance from the weight of the ball itself, so you train your ability to push against a resistance in terms of power development also. And here we see him doing the hang power clean, perhaps the king of power exercises. The problem with the Olympic lifting variations such as the hang power clean is that they are notoriously technically demanding. There is so many parameters into it, so much time you have to spend to learn them. But if you learn them, they can give you a lot of benefits. The hang power clean, it mainly trains your triple extension phase, which is extension of the ankles, knees and hips. And this movement has a lot of applicability to many sporting movements and power production in various movements. And the benefit with the hang power clean as opposed to the full power clean that is from the ground and up is that it removes that element, and you can focus on you can isolate the portion of the power production, the second pull and the third pull that is, because this is really all you need as an athlete competing in a power sport. So it's less time spent on mastering the movement and you just isolate the portion that you're after. Another thing that there is tons of footage of him doing is training his reaction time through various tennis balls and dot drills and things of that nature. Now there are some studies that have shown that reaction times are higher in athletes compared to non-athletes. And this study showed that beginners, when they participated in once per week boxing, their reaction times improved. Once again, we have to be careful with the cause and effects of studies like this. Oftentimes they are very simplified, but one thing we can be quite certain of is that reaction time is very important in boxing. Here we can see him doing some barbell deadlifts, but in a stance that is somewhere between a sumo deadlift and a conventional deadlift. I guess his coach instructed him to do this because it was anatomically suitable for him. He displays a lot of power obviously, his back angle is very good core tension, and he's using that belt to push against it to establish this core tension easier. One inherent problem that I see here is that his knees cave in a bit, and I guess this can be contributed to a lack of glute activation, but with the right guidance this is a simple fix. But in other clips this problem seems to be less evident, so he probably addressed it at a later point. And here we can see him do a trap bar deadlift, and to be honest this seems way more suitable for him. It looked much more efficient, better posture, everything looked better, and this is no surprise because the trap bar deadlift, it has a much smaller learning curve than the conventional deadlift because it's easier to maintain better posture when you don't have to keep the bar close to your shin bones and close to your thighs at all times, and it is basically much more forgiving for different anatomies. Now here is a very special exercise. I'm not really sure what his coach was thinking here when he prescribed this lift to him. It seems to be some form of touch and go dynamic version of the Anderson squat. In the Anderson squat you basically begin from the bottom position in a pinned manner and you push off all you got from this bottom position, and then you go down again and start from a dead stop. But Artur here, he seems to be bouncing the weight, which I guess can heighten the impact forces on his body, like it has to bounce on him, and it doesn't look safe in my opinion. And it kind of ruins the point of doing the Anderson squat, because the point is to start from a dead position so that you can think of things such as having a tight core and engaged back in a proper bar position. It's almost like a deadlift variation of a squat. But when the bar bounces on you in this touch and go manner, it kind of ruins the purpose. Anyways, I'm not sure why they did this touch and go variation. Perhaps they wanted to perform a partial squat in a dynamic manner, but we can see some minor form breakdowns here. His hips is shifting to one side and the knee wobbles a bit. And when it comes to issues like this, the job of any competent strength and conditioning coach is to look at the root cause. Sometimes it can be just improper muscular activation. For example, you must activate the glutes. Those are what stabilizes the lower and the upper body. The glutes collectively are the largest and strongest muscles in the body, and they help in stabilize the hips, the spine, all of it. And this must be perfectly activated and tremendous tension when dealing with heavy weight. And sometimes it can be a mobility restriction, which makes your body shift to one side or the other. The point is we need to get to the root cause. Nevertheless, technical aspects aside, he's doing 140 kilograms in the video for multiple reps, so it is obviously very strong for a boxer at his body weight, and he's obviously a super powerful athlete. Now when it comes to things like this, I am not downplaying the athlete. Artur is a world champion boxer with a perfect record. He is one of my favorite boxers. I love watching him box, and I love his power production, but this is simply an objective analysis of the form. It is my job as a strength and conditioning coach, and I wanna emphasize this. Now what is the point here? Am I allowed to sit here on the comfort of my chair criticizing the routine of a world champion boxer? That's not the point. The point is that he would be even better than he is right now, probably if he had addressed those issues. That's the point. And never look at it like it's the athlete's fault. It's not his fault. He's a boxer. He spends 100% of his time in boxing. He cannot be an expert in strength training or strength and conditioning as well. This is the job of the strength and conditioning coach to give him the proper guidance. And finally we can see him perform tons of core work with various abdominal exercises, lumbar spine exercises, oblique exercises. The core is the center of the body, and it is what transfers power from the lower body to the upper body. It provides stability, helps you with dealing with injuries, injury prevention, all of that. The core is super important in almost any sport, so you need to do tons of core work as an athlete. And now that we're into power transfer and injury prevention, he also does a lot of accessory exercises. Those are basically more isolated exercises that target specific muscles that are otherwise hard to target, with compound strength exercises that target multiple muscles. For example, the dumbbell bench rows, as he's doing here, and he alternates them with the dumbbell bench press. And this is because he wants to have a fine balance of anterior muscles and posterior muscles. Muscular imbalance is a root cause of injury, and this must be addressed. You must be proportional in your body. You cannot be overdeveloped in one part, because that would be like building a house that's too much inclined forward. You need balance in your body first and foremost if you want to prevent injuries. Thank you for watching this analysis. If you're interested in private coaching by me, online coaching, just visit my websites. I work with combat sports athletes all over the world. And I also have programs available in my website. Check them out if you want. Thank you for watching.